So there are a number of things from the prior grades that you'll be expected to kind of know on starting grade 5, and for the purposes of this course, I thought it would be quite good for us to go over some of the major areas that you'll need to know. So there's kind of two outcomes that might happen on watching this video. One, that you might kind of watch it and start feeling a bit overwhelmed because a lot of it you don't understand. If that's the case, I would really suggest maybe pausing and not doing this course first. I would pause and go back to something simpler like grade 2 or grade 3, or perhaps an online course for one of those music theory grades. You can also pick up a book like the AB Guide to Music Theory, which is a really kind of methodical book and that takes you through a lot of the fundamentals. But then the other outcome is that you might feel incredibly familiar with this, in which case you're probably very, very suited to doing grade 5. But another outcome might be that you kind of know a lot of it, but some areas you're not so sure about. If that's the case, that's still a really okay standpoint from which to start this grade 5 music theory course, because it means that some areas are weaker, but you've kind of got a good idea. So let's just start straight away and let's look at the area of time signatures. So from grades 1 to 4, what you'll be expected to know are the following time signatures: 4/4, 3/4, 2/4, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 3/8, 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8. So just knowing that they exist is obviously not enough. You need to understand how they work. So the key thing that most people get confused about are these top numbers and the bottom numbers and what on earth they mean. So hopefully you'll be aware now that a 4 on the bottom means that the beat is made up of crotchets. So for example, in 3/4, we have 1, 2, 3 crotchet beats per bar, right? Like this. And inside of that, of course, you can fit 2 quavers inside each beat, etc., etc. So in 3/8, however, what we have is that 8 means a quaver beat, right? So there is only space for 3 quavers inside of 3/8. And that means that if you're subdividing 3/8 inside of each of these notes here, you have room for 2 semiquavers, like that. But in things like 6/8, what we have is 2 dotted crotchet beats per bar, because we're in 2 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And inside of those is subdivided into 3 quavers. Slightly confusing. So if this is making sense to you and you're like, yeah, Jack, come on board, then this is all good. But if this is starting to confuse you a little bit, then this is one of the indications that you might need to go and revise some of the stuff from grade 4. Right, so let's move on to the next area. The next thing that you need to know about is about the appropriate grouping of notes and rests. So for example, in a time signature of 3/4, we could have something like this. Now, that kind of works, right? You've got 3 beats in a bar, and so you've got 1.5 beats there, plus the half beat there equals 2, plus 1 more beat there equals 3. So it works mathematically, but the arrangement of this layout doesn't make it very easy for us to see where the beats are. And that's the really important thing to understand when you're doing the appropriate grouping of notes and rests, is to allow the reader who's reading the music to see where the beats are. So if we drew the beats here, what would be happening is we'd have beat 2 here, and there's nothing visually going on at this vertical moment here. we've just got beat 2 sort of halfway between here. And similarly here, when beat 3 happens, it's very hard for the viewer, say someone who's sight reading and sort of zooming past this really fast here, it's very hard for them to see where the beat is. So to do this more appropriately, we do something like this. We'd have a crotchet tied into a quaver, which is beamed to the next quaver, right? So that gives us a very clear indication of where beat 1, well, beat 1 was always clear, it's always going to be clear beat 1, but beat 2 is very clear now. But we tie into it, so that note there still will last 1.5 beats, because it's tied into it, it's into the next note. And this note here will also need to be tied, because we need something that sounds 1 beat long, but off of the beat. So really this would be the better way to draw this bar here. So not so good, better. So that's about the grouping of notes and rests. And this also applies to rests as well. And if you're not sure about this, an indication to go back and do a bit of revision. But if you're all good, let's move on. So next I'd like to talk about note and restorations. The ones that you're expected to know are the following. So we'll start off with the longest, which is a breve. It's like a semi-breve initially, and then you have these 2 lines either side of it, and that lasts 8 beats. Then we have a semi-breve, which you should know, 4 beats. Then we have a minim, which lasts 2 beats, a crotchet, which lasts 1 beat, quaver, half a beat, semi-quaver, quarter of a beat, and then a demi-semi-quaver, which lasts 1/8 of a beat. And each of these have their equivalent rests. So I actually had to remind myself of this one before I did this video, because I never draw this one. You basically fill up a box underneath the breve there, and that's 8 beats long. And that's only relevant if you're in time signatures that are sort of bigger than 4/4. Then we have a semi-breve, which is like this. Then a minim, which is on top of the line. Then we have a crotchet rest, then a quaver rest, then a semi-quaver rest, and then a demi-semi-quaver rest. Again, quite hard to draw. So that's note and rest durations. The other thing regarding rhythms that you'll be expected to know are the dotted note. So if you take something like a crotchet here and then you add a little dot beside it, what that does is it adds half. So you should know about that. You should also know about a double dotted note, which is then half and then half of that half. So half and then a quarter is added to that note there. And you're also expected to know about ties. So if I take this crotchet and this crotchet here and tie them together, that's effectively sounds like that minim above there. And you might do that if there's a bar line there, for example, and you can't actually voice a minim on beat 4 of the bar, for an example. Okay, so the other thing that you're expected to know about from the prior grades are the 3 clefs. So the 3 clefs so far are treble, bass, and alto. So the best way to understand these is place middle C, C4, on these clefs to kind of work out where everything's orientated. So that was middle C in treble clef, this is middle C in bass clef, and this is middle C in alto clef. So you don't necessarily need to read alto clef or even bass clef really, really well to do grade 1 to 4 music theory, and even grade 5. You just need to know where middle C is, and that way you can work up. So for example, we know that F would be 1, 2, 3, 4 notes from C, 1, 2, 3, 4 notes. We know therefore that that's going to be F. So if you have a question in the exam about moving something into treble, moving something from treble into alto, then you can just resort to just asking yourself, where's middle C? So that brings up my other point, which is you'll have been asked to do things like this, move a quick melody. I'll do something super simple because I want to whiz on from this. Say we've got this melody here in treble clef, G, E, C. They might say, move this into alto clef, right? So in which case you'd be able to go like this. That's transposing it in bass clef. It'd be rather harder to do because you need lots of ledger lines. But it would look like this. So not really transposing, but moving a melody, such as this one, into two other clefs. Yeah. Okay, next. So for this one, I thought I'd just draw it all out beforehand rather than recording it because it would take way too long. These are the keys you're expected to know before you start grade 5. So what we have are the following. We have C major and its relative minor of A, right? We have G major and its relative minor of E, D major and B minor. We have A major and F sharp minor. So obviously this is going in order of the circle of fifths, if you know that. E major and C sharp minor, and then B major, and then G sharp minor. So next we have the flat keys. So if we go back up top of the circle of fifths and then turn left, what we have is F and its relative minor of D, B flat and its relative minor of G, E flat and its relative minor of C, A flat, relative minor F, and then lastly D flat and relative minor B flat. Those are the keys you're expected to know before grade 5 music theory. So now we come to naming notes in a scale and also the different types of scales you're supposed to know. So if we take something simple like the C major scale, standard, right? We've got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then I will draw C up at the top there. So numbering notes in a scale should be fairly straightforward, but it's called scale degrees, and it's very simple. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and you could say 8, but really it's better to say 1, degree 1 of the scale. Again, it depends on what context you're thinking. You know, in jazz we tend to go up 9, 10, 11, but we won't do that, especially not for grade 5 music theory. So that's numbering a scale. Then the keys the scales you're expected to know are major in every key that was mentioned in just before in those keys, and then the 3 different types of minor scales. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the relative minor of C major to keep things simple. So the first minor is the natural minor, which is basically all the same notes but in a different order, or rather starting at a different point. So what we're doing here is we're starting at A as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the A minor scale, which I'm drawing out here. And you'd number that like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc. And that's the natural minor scale. It's completely the same notes as C major, just in a different order. But we also have 2 other types of minor scales, right? One where I'll just quickly draw this out again. Very roughly drawn there. The first one is where we change the 7th note, right, to be 1 semitone higher, to be G sharp, on the way up and on the way down as well, right? So this is called the harmonic minor. My pen's going crazy here. And I'll write natural here as well for you. And then the other one down here is different on the way up as it is on the way down. And I won't draw the whole thing, because what happens is we have the natural minor scale until the 6th and 7th notes, which are raised by 1 semitone. And then on the way down, they go back to exactly as they were in the natural minor scale up here. So we're raised on the way up and back down to normal on the way down, and that's called the melodic minor. Well, all of these are natural minor, harmonic minor, just haven't written them there. So you're expected to know those in all of the relative minors of the previous part of this video where I showed all the keys. So for example, you'd be expected to know the melodic minor of C sharp minor, which is the relative minor of E. So if all of this is going over your head, maybe take a little look at this area, because it can get a bit confusing, especially when you're doing things like the melodic minor in a key that you're not so familiar with, like B flat minor, for example. Okay, let's move on. You also need to have an awareness of the chromatic scale and how it's drawn out if you draw it in order. So going up here, I've got the chromatic scale, which is every note in order. So on the piano, you'd just be running your fingers up, going white, black, white, black, white, black, and then white, white, and then black, white, black, white. If you play piano, you know what I mean. And then if you're going down, same thing, right? But the way that I've written it here is as we're going up, we go from C to C sharp, to D sharp, to E, to F sharp, to G. What I'm doing is I'm doing sharps. I'm spelling the chromatic scale as sharps on the way up, and then when we come down, I'm spelling it with flats. That's just a convention. It may not come up in the grades, but it's important that you know that. So the other thing is intervals. So intervals are the spaces between two notes. If we take this E here, we go up to a B, the distance between those two notes is called a perfect fifth. Or from this D here to this B, the interval between these two notes is called a minor third. Or from this A here to this F is called a minor sixth. So you're expected to know all intervals in all keys within an octave and how you spell those. So if you're not sure about that, go and revisit it. So next we're supposed to know about the chords of a key. If we take something like F major here, we're supposed to know that if we build a chord on degree 1 of the scale, we get that. If we were to build it on the 5th degree of the scale, we'd get that. And it's important that you know that this is chord 5, that this would be chord 4, etc., etc. So let's do this in another key. Let's have A major. Chord 1 would be A, chord 6, F sharp, chord 5, be E. It's important that you know all the notes here. 1, 6, 5, and be really, really familiar. So this is the sort of practice that I'd really recommend that you do at a piano. So play them, even if you're not a pianist, get to know the chords at a piano. It'll really help you. Next thing is about constructing a major scale, and you'll notice that I've taken away the staff paper in front of us, and all we have is these line of dots here. So this is a really useful way, which I got from David Reed over at improviseforreal.com, of visualizing the major scale. So if you notice here, there's no note names here, but what I want you to imagine is that this is the chromatic scale. It's on your instrument or on the piano, every single note in order in the chromatic scale. So this, if we were, say, starting on C here, this would be C, C sharp, D, D sharp, etc., etc. So if we were to highlight the notes that make up the C major scale, right, C, D, E, F, G, right, all the white notes on the piano, what we'd get is this pattern here. Right? So what we have is we have the interval of a tone and a smiley face, tone, semitone, tone, 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 and then semitone. C, C sharp, we don't need. D, D sharp, we don't need. E, the next note up is F, and we have an F sharp, which we don't need, etc., etc., and we get G, A, B, and C. So that's the construct of a major scale, and it also helps you view, I'm drawing that wrong, multitasking here. So it helps you view the intervals. We have tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 and then a semitone. Now this will really help you when you start creating a major scale from scratch. You can actually use this right now. If you don't know all of your keys, you could just hit a random note on the piano and make sure that you move up a tone, then a tone, then a semitone, then a tone, then a tone, then a tone, and then a semitone. And what you'll be doing is you'll be playing the major scale from your root note here. Okay, so let's look at how this works when we move to staff paper and how it will give you a greater understanding of how the major scale is actually constructed. So here's the key of G major. And if we think back to our tone, tone, semitone thing, what we have is, if we draw between these dots, Remember now we filtered out the other notes of the chromatic scale. We haven't got a G sharp here anymore. What we have is the distance between these two notes is a tone, and then between these two is a tone. Do you remember how this one works? Semitone, tone, 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 and then from F sharp, which is this one here, to G is a semitone. So that's how it works with the major scale, and you'll be expected to understand and potentially draw where these intervals are. For example, they might say, highlight where there's a semitone in the major scale, and you do something like that, semitone here and semitone here. Similar thing. Okay. So grade 5 is really where your compositional ability really starts to be developed, but there's a certain area that I want to go over just in case you haven't done it, that's kind of required before we start doing the actual composing a melody section, and that's composing a balanced 4-bar rhythm. So if this is very straightforward to you, then great, but I'm just going to go over it. So here we have a given opening here. It sounds like this. And what you're expected to do in grades 1 to 4, I can't remember exactly which one it is, it's probably grades 3 and 4, you're expected to respond to that given opening. You see here, this is my response here. In a way that complements and uses the material of that given opening. So you see here, what I've done is I've used that here, right? So this first bar is used again in bar 3, and then I do something very similar but not the same in bar 2, and then I finish nicely at the end. And a bad example of a response is this one here at the bottom, right? This one sounds like this. Etc. It's just not making sense. So if this doesn't make sense to you and you're kind of like, you know, what does he mean by an unbalanced rhythm and stuff like that, you could plow on if this is just one of the few areas that you're not sure about, because I go over it in the composing a melody section. But if you want to, you can go back to grades 3 and 4 and have a look at these sorts of things about composing a balanced 4-bar rhythm. So next we have irregular time divisions. So what I've done here is I've drawn crotchet note heads at the bottom to represent the beats of the bar. We're in common time, 4 beats in a bar, without tails to them, just to really represent where the beat is. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now over the top, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do things like a crotchet, then 2 quavers, and then maybe a quaver rest, and a quaver, and then a crotchet to end. So that would look like this. And we can see that this perfectly matches up. Beat 1 is inside of this beat here. And what I'm doing here is I'm drawing something called beat squares. It's something that we'll come across later, but it's a very useful way to kind of think about the beats of the bar, right? So inside of each of these squares is the one beat. And we can see that everything fits perfectly. We've got beat 1 here, beat 2 here, beat 3 begins with an empty half beat rest, then we have the and of 3 here, and then we have a 4. So that all kind of makes sense, right? Let's draw something different though. So I'm going to draw the note heads at the bottom again to represent where the beat is. And this time I'm going to do something different. You'll see here that this beat, beat 2 here, got divided into 2 quavers, right? And that's a regular time division. So it's the 1, 2, and we've split 2 into 2 chunks, right? But you can do other stuff, right? If you look here, what I'm doing, if I do 3 quavers here, you might say, well, that doesn't work actually. You can't fit 3 quavers because that would be saying something like 3 halves make a whole. Well, that's not true. 3 halves make 1 1/2. But actually, an irregular time division is this. This is a triplet. And what that does is it squeezes 3 quavers, which usually last exactly a half beat, into 1 beat, or 1 beat square as you see here. So that sounds like whereas this sounds like if I draw a few more of these. So what we have there is 3 triplets, da 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 da, or 3 sets of triplets, and then a normal quaver ending. This would sound like this. Okay, so that's an irregular time division. But we can also go the other way, right? What we've done there is we've had a time signature which divides the beat in twos each time. But now if we take a time signature like 6/8, which we know is made up of 2 beats of dotted crotchets, right? Oh, I'm drawing stems there, which I shouldn't, to be consistent. So usually the beat is divided like this, kind of like in a triplet-y way, right? So there are 3 quavers inside of each beat, usually, right? You can make so whilst these are called triplets, you can do something that's called duplets, which is dividing the beat in half again, because usually it's divided in 3, and now we can divide it in half again. But instead of drawing a 3 over the top, again, I'm just drawing the beat squares here to be super clear for you, we draw a 2, right? So this is a duplet, and these are triplets. Phew, okay, long video, but hopefully useful for you to go through. There are a number of other miscellaneous things which I won't go through because it would just make this video way too long, but if you don't understand them, look them up. They are dynamic markings, articulation symbols, understanding of phrasing, double sharp and flat signs and their cancellation, enharmonic equivalents, ornaments, and performance directions. Okay, hope this has been useful and see you in the next video.